I was the only person at work who bothered to be kind to the guy everyone mocked and called weird, and what he did for me 2 years later not only changed my entire life but exposed every person who had laughed at him from the beginning. I found out on a Thursday morning in the break room. Not from an announcement. Not from anyone who thought I deserved to be told directly. From Cassie in accounts, who was telling the story to 2 other people when I walked in to get coffee and who did not stop telling it when I arrived because the story was not about me and therefore my presence did not register as requiring a pause. The story was about Elliot Marsh. Elliot Marsh, who had sat in the cubicle to my left for 2 years and 3 months, who brought the same lunch every day in a gray insulated bag and arranged it on his desk in the same order before eating it, who wore the same rotation of 4 shirts, and who had never once in 2 years and 3 months been included in a happy hour or a birthday lunch or any of the informal social infrastructure of our floor. Elliot Marsh, whose habit of writing things down in a physical notebook while everyone else typed had been a running commentary topic since his first week. Elliot Marsh, who gave detailed answers to casual questions and who did not always read the social signal that detailed answers were not what casual questions were requesting. Elliot Marsh, who people did impressions of at the Christmas party 2 years ago when he was not there, and who I had watched be the subject of those impressions from across the room and had felt something in my chest that I had not acted on because acting on it would have required a courage I had not yet located. Cassie's story was that Elliot Marsh had resigned the previous afternoon. And that the reason he had resigned was that he had accepted a position somewhere else. And that the somewhere else was a company called Meridian Systems. And that Meridian Systems was the company that had just been announced, that morning, in the business section that Cassie had apparently been reading before I walked in, as the subject of a $430 million acquisition by a technology conglomerate that I will not name but which was the kind of name that appeared in headlines as a shorthand for a specific tier of outcome. Elliot Marsh had been the 3rd employee at Meridian Systems. He had joined it 2 years before he joined our company. He had worked there part-time through our company and had left to return to it full-time. His equity stake, which Cassie was speculating about with the enthusiasm of a person who had just understood the approximate math, was the kind of number that changed the context of every impression anyone had ever done of him at a Christmas party. I poured my coffee. I went back to my desk. I sat down in the cubicle where I had spent 2 years and 3 months to the right of a man who arranged his lunch on his desk in the same order every day, and I looked at the empty cubicle to my left. His notebook was still there. He had left his notebook. Let me go back to the beginning of the 2 years and 3 months before I tell you what happened next, because the ending is only comprehensible through the accumulation of the ordinary days that preceded it. I joined the company at 27. Mid-level analyst position in a data operations team, the kind of role that has a clear entry point and an unclear ceiling depending on variables that nobody explains during onboarding. The floor had 43 people and the social architecture of a place that had been running long enough to have established its hierarchies and its informal groupings and the specific geography of who ate lunch with whom and who was copied on what emails and who got the nod when the director walked through. Elliot had joined 3 weeks before me. I met him on my second day when I was trying to find the printer that was not the printer everyone used for regular printing but the printer you used for the specific large format reports that the Tuesday presentations required. He was at the printer. He explained the printer to me with the detailed specificity of a man who understood that I needed the information rather than a general indication of the printer's location. He told me 3 things about the printer that I needed to know and 1 thing about the printer that was interesting but not immediately necessary, and he said of all 4 things in the same tone and with the same quality of attention. I thanked him. He nodded and went back to his desk. I filed him under thorough and continued with my second day. Over the following weeks I came to understand the specific social position Elliot occupied on the floor. It was not a position anyone had assigned him with intention. It was the position that forms when a person's manner does not match the unspoken requirements of a particular environment and the environment's response is the spectrum of things between polite distance and active mockery, and Elliot's environment had landed somewhere in the middle of that spectrum and had been operating there since his first week. The impressions started at the 3-month mark. I was in the conference room for a project meeting when I first heard one. A man named Derek, who had been with the company for 7 years and had the specific confidence of a person whose longevity in a place had converted into informal authority, did an impression of Elliot explaining the printer to a new hire. The impression captured Elliot's tendency to provide comprehensive information rather than summary information and exaggerated it for comedic effect, and the conference room laughed with the laughter of people who recognized the target and found the recognition funny. I did not laugh. I also did not say anything. I filed that in the drawer where I put the things I did not have the courage to address directly, and I went back to the meeting. What I did instead of the courage I did not have was small and private, and I want to be honest about that because the story of how I became the only person who was kind to Elliot is not a story of heroism. It is the story of a person who could not quite bring themselves to participate in the mockery and express the not participating through the accumulation of small ordinary gestures that I would not have described, in the moment, as acts of particular meaning. I answered when he spoke to me. Not the performative answering of someone demonstrating kindness for an audience. The ordinary answering of a person talking to another person, with actual attention, with follow-up questions when what he said was interesting, which it often was, with the continuity of a conversation that had a previous conversation preceding it, and an assumption of future conversations following it. I learned that he read everything. Not in the way of a person performing intellectual curiosity, but in the way of a person for whom reading was the primary mode of engaging with the world, and who had a specific and deep knowledge of a range of subjects that he would discuss with the precision of someone who had thought about the thing rather than skimmed it. I learned that he had a sister he was close to and that they talked every Sunday, and that the Sunday call was the fixed point of his week in the way that certain relationships become the architecture you build everything else around. I learned that he was working on something. Not from a direct announcement. From the accumulation of evidence that the careful observer accumulates, the way he arrived 10 minutes before his shift started and used those 10 minutes on his personal laptop rather than the work one, the way his lunch was always eaten at his desk on the days when he seemed most absorbed in whatever the personal laptop contained, the way he sometimes wrote in his physical notebook with the specific focus of a person translating something from their head rather than from external source material. I did not ask him what he was working on. I did not ask because the information was not mine to request, and because I understood, from watching his interactions with other people, that direct questions about his outside work produced the detailed responses that were the basis for certain impressions, and I did not want to contribute to the material. I asked him about the reading instead. And then one Tuesday afternoon he told me about meridian systems. It was not a big announcement. I want to be precise about this because the telling of it afterward will inevitably make it sound more significant than it felt in the moment, and the moment was significant only in retrospect. We were both at our desks in the post-lunch period of a Tuesday, the time of day that has the specific slowness of a ship that has not yet caught the afternoon wind, and he looked up from his personal laptop and said something to me in the tone of a person continuing a conversation we had not started. I've been working on something for 3 years. His voice. The direct, unqualified opening of a man who had decided to tell me something. I put down what I was doing. He told me about meridian systems. Not in the way of a person pitching something. In the way of a person describing work they found genuinely interesting to someone they trusted to find it interesting too. He told me what the company did, which was in the infrastructure layer of data architecture, a field I had adjacent knowledge of from my own work and which I understood well enough to follow what he was saying. He told me about the problem they were solving. He told me about the 2 other people he was building it with. He talked for 22 minutes. I listened for 22 minutes. At the end I asked him 2 questions. The questions were genuine, about the specific technical approach they were taking, and he answered them with the thoroughness that was his characteristic mode and which I had by this point learned to receive as the quality it was rather than the quirk it was treated as elsewhere on the floor. It sounds like the right problem to be working on. My voice. He looked at me for a moment. Yes. His voice. It is. He went back to his personal laptop. I went back to what I was doing. That was the Tuesday conversation. What it produced, 14 months later, was the thing I found out about on a Thursday morning in the break room from Cassian accounts who did not stop talking when I walked in because the story was not about me. Except that it was about me. I just did not know yet how much. The notebook was still on his desk. I walked to his cubicle at 11:15, after the break room conversation had ended and the floor had resumed its Thursday texture, and I looked at the notebook the way you look at something that belongs to a person who is no longer there. It was a Leuchtturm, dark blue, the same kind he had always used. His name was on the inside cover in his handwriting. Under his name was my name. And under my name was a phone number I did not recognize. I stood at his empty cubicle holding the notebook. Then I took it back to my desk and I turned to the first page. The first page had a date at the top. 14 months ago. The Tuesday conversation. And below the date, 2 lines. Told Nora today. She asked the right questions. She always asks the right questions. I sat at my desk with a notebook and I felt the specific weight of a thing I had not understood while it was happening becoming visible all at once. I called the number. It rang twice. Elliot's voice. I left it for you. His voice. The number is my attorney. Call her today if you can. She's expecting you. My desk. The Thursday morning. The floor around me continuing its ordinary Thursday operations with no awareness of what was happening at my workstation. What did you do? My voice. Low. I set aside something for you. His voice. A year ago. When the acquisition looked likely. You were kind to me when nobody else was. Not as a performance. Just as a normal thing. I noticed it every day. A pause. Call her today. The line ended. I held my phone. I looked at my screen. I called the attorney. Her name was Sandra Cole, and she had the efficient warmth of a woman who had been expecting this call and had prepared for it and considered preparation to be the foundation of her professional ethic. She told me what Elliot had done. She told me the number. I wrote the number down on the back of a piece of paper that was on my desk, and I looked at the number for a long time. The number was not the acquisition amount. It was a portion of Elliot's equity distribution, set aside in a legal instrument 14 months ago, the specific and documented act of a man who had decided that one person's ordinary decency deserved recognition that matched the scale of what he had built. The number had 6 figures. The first figure was not a 1. I sat at my desk until 12:30. The floor continued around me. Derek was at the printer. Cassie was on a call. The Tuesday presentation reports were stacked in the corner. The ordinary Thursday of a floor that did not know that the man they had done impressions of at Christmas parties had just restructured the financial life of the only person who had answered when he spoke. I called my best friend Dara from the parking garage at 12:31. She picked up on the second ring. Tell me everything. Her voice. Reading something in my voice before I said anything. I told her. The break room. The notebook. The number. Sandra Cole. The 14 months ago. The first figure not being a 1. Dara was quiet for a moment that had significant weight. He set it aside a year ago. Her voice. Confirming. 14 months. My voice. Before the acquisition was finalized. Her voice. When it looked likely. My voice. Another quiet. Nora. Her voice. He watched you for a year before that. To know you were worth doing this for. My hands around my phone. The parking garage. The ordinary Thursday outside. He said I asked the right questions. My voice. What does that mean? Her voice. I think it means I ask questions like I actually wanted the answers. My voice. Which I did. Dara was quiet for a moment. Every person on that floor had the same access to him. Her voice. Every person there could have done what you did. Yes. My voice. And they did impressions instead. Her voice. Yes. My voice. The parking garage. My hands. The number written on the back of a piece of paper in my pocket. What are you going to do? Her voice. I'm going to call Sandra Cole back. My voice. And then I'm going to figure out what the rest of my life looks like. The cliffhanger was not the number. The cliffhanger was what happened when I went back upstairs. Derek was in the break room when I came back. He was telling the Meridian story to a new version of the audience, the version that had accumulated since the morning, the growing group of people on the floor who were doing the math on Elliot's equity stake and arriving at the specific expression of people who have understood the math and are now reconstructing their 2 years and 3 months of behavior in its light. Derek's version of the story had the quality of a man who was finding the narrative of Elliot's success entertaining in the way you find things entertaining when you have not yet understood your own position within them. I mean, the guy was, Derek's voice. He made a specific gesture, the gesture from the impression at the Christmas party, the one that had made the conference room laugh. I walked past the break room. I went to my desk. I sat down. I looked at the empty cubicle to my left. I thought about the Christmas party. The conference room. The laughter. My own silence. I thought about what Elliot had written in the notebook. She was kind to me when nobody else was. Not as a performance. Just as a normal thing. I noticed it every day. I thought about what it meant to be noticed every day by a person who noticed everything. I submitted my resignation at 4:15. Not from anger. Not as a statement. I submitted it because Sandra Cole and I had spoken for 40 minutes in the afternoon, and what she had explained about the instrument and the timeline and the vesting and the opportunity attached to it made my current position not just unnecessary but actively in conflict with the next thing. The next thing was a position at Meridian Systems. Not offered out of charity. Offered because Elliot had told me 14 months ago to a colleague he trusted that the person in the cubicle to his right asked the right questions, and he had been watching me for 2 years, and the company had a role that required someone who could ask the right questions about complex data infrastructure, and he had documented the offer alongside the financial instrument in the same legal arrangement. I did not know about the job offer until Sandra told me. I had thought the notebook was the end of it. It was not the end of it. My resignation letter was 4 sentences. Professional and complete and containing nothing about the Christmas party or Derek or Cassie or any of the 23 months of a floor that had treated Elliot as a character in a recurring sketch rather than a person building something that would eventually reconfigure the financial circumstances of the one person who had treated him as the latter. I submitted it. I closed my laptop. I said goodbye to the two people I had genuinely liked on the floor, a woman named Petra who had never participated in the impressions and who hugged me at the elevator with the specific warmth of someone who understood something significant had happened without knowing exactly what, and a man named James who had shared the coffee machine with me for 2 years and who shook my hand with both of his. I did not say goodbye to Derek. I did not say goodbye to Cassie. I walked out of the building at 4:47 on a Thursday afternoon and I stood on the sidewalk for a moment with a piece of paper in my pocket and the notebook under my arm, and I felt the specific thing that is not triumph and not vindication but is the complex arrival of a thing that has been building for longer than you knew. Dara came over that evening. She arrived with food and the specific energy of a woman who had been processing the phone call from the parking garage for 6 hours and had arrived at a series of conclusions she intended to share. We sat at my kitchen table and she put food in front of me and we ate for a few minutes in the comfortable silence of 11 years of friendship and then she looked at me. Talk me through the job. Her voice. I talked her through the job. What Sandra had described of the role, what I understood from the 2 years of listening to Elliot about what Meridian did and what problems it was solving and what the infrastructure layer looked like from the inside. Dara listened with both hands around her cup. You understood it when he explained it. Her voice. I found it genuinely interesting. My voice. That's what he noticed. Her voice. Not kindness as a project. Interest as a natural state. My hands around my own cup. The kitchen. He said I asked the right questions. My voice again. Because you wanted the answers. Her voice. Because you were actually listening. I looked at my cup. Every person on that floor had the same 2 years. My voice. The same cubicle proximity. The same break room. The same Tuesday meetings. And they did impressions. Her voice. Flat. Precise. And they did impressions. My voice. The kitchen. The Thursday evening becoming Friday morning outside the window. Are you angry? Her voice. I thought about this honestly. Not at them. My voice. At the years of not saying something. At the Christmas party. At the conference room. A pause. I didn't say anything. No. Her voice. But you didn't participate. That's a low bar. My voice. It's the bar that produced the notebook. Her voice. He didn't need you to defend him publicly. He needed someone to talk to him like a person. That's it. That's the whole thing. I looked at the piece of paper on the table between us. The number I had written down. The first figure not being a 1. He noticed it every day. My voice. The line from the notebook. Dara looked at the piece of paper. People who are treated as invisible notice everything. Her voice. Quiet. The voice of a woman saying something she had thought about before this evening. I started at Meridian Systems 11 days after my resignation. Elliot was not there when I arrived. He was in 3 different cities in 11 days for the acquisition transition, and I received a message from him at 6 in the morning of my first day that was 4 words. Happy first day, Nora. I replied with 3. Thank you, Elliot. The office was different from the floor I had spent 2 years and 3 months on. Smaller and less organized in its physical geography and with the specific energy of a company that had been built by people who were interested in the problem they were solving rather than in the social architecture of the people solving it. Nobody did impressions of anybody. I noticed this on the first day and kept noticing it. The Thursday after my first week, Elliot was back in the office. He came in at his usual time, which I recognized because it was the same time he had always arrived, 10 minutes before he needed to be there, and he sat up at his desk with the same quality of attention he had always brought to set up. He looked over. How's the role? His voice. Good. My voice. Better than good. The infrastructure question in the 3rd project brief is interesting. He looked at me. Which part? His voice. The latency problem in the handoff layer. My voice. I have a question about the architecture decision they made in 2021. He picked up his notebook. The same kind, Leuchtturm, dark blue. Ask it. His voice. I asked it. He answered it. With the thoroughness that was his characteristic mode, the completeness that had been the subject of impressions in a conference room 2 years ago and which I was now receiving as what it had always been, which was the quality of a person who understood that a question deserved its full answer. We worked for 40 minutes. At the end, I had a clearer understanding of the architecture decision and 3 follow-up questions and the specific satisfaction of having learned something real from a person who knew it completely. Good questions. His voice. Going back to his work. My desk. The office. The Thursday morning. Thank you for everything. My voice. Not just the instrument. The notebook. What you wrote. He looked at his notebook. You were the only person who made the floor bearable. His voice. Even. Not performing the weight of it. Stating it. I wanted you to know that was worth something. It wasn't heroic. My voice. I should have said something at the Christmas party. He looked at me. You weren't ready. His voice. That's different from not caring. I looked at my desk. The notebook is with my things. My voice. I kept it. I know. His voice. I left it for you. The floor found out incrementally, the way floors find out things that have happened in their midst and that recontextualize the previous 2 years in a way that nobody is comfortable processing publicly. Cassie found out first because she had been the one telling the break room story and she was the most invested in following the Meridian thread. She put together the connection, my resignation and the timing, within a week. She sent me a message asking if it was true that I had gotten something from the acquisition. I did not reply. Derek found out from a different source. He sent a message that was framed as congratulations and which contained, in its second paragraph, a reminder that we had been on the same team for 2 years and had worked well together, a framing that I recognized as the specific positioning of a person who understood that a relationship was being recalculated and was attempting to influence the calculation. I did not reply to Derek either. Petra, who had hugged me at the elevator and who had never participated in the impressions, sent a message that was one sentence. I always thought he was remarkable and I'm glad something good happened. I replied to Petra. I told her I thought so too and I hoped the floor was treating her well and that if she ever wanted coffee I knew where to find it. She replied within an hour. We had coffee the following week. What happened to Derek and Cassie in the conference room Christmas party crowd was not dramatic. Nothing happened to them. That is the honest version and the honest version matters. They continued working at the company. Derek was passed over for a promotion he had been expecting at the 18-month mark, which may or may not have been connected to anything related to Elliot, and which I did not investigate because it was not mine to investigate. Cassie moved to a different team. The floor reorganized in the way that floors reorganize when a significant departure creates a vacancy that the existing architecture tries to fill. Nobody's career ended. Nobody was exposed in a public accounting. The Christmas party impressions did not surface as a formal record. What happened instead was the specific quiet consequence of a reality becoming known. Every person who had done an impression of Elliot Marsh now knew that Elliot Marsh had noticed. Not in a vengeful way. In the simple factual way of a person who paid attention to everything and had documented what he observed and had made his decisions accordingly. The financial instrument was not revenge. It was recognition of the one person who had been worth recognizing. The absence of their names from that recognition was its own information. They would be aware of that absence for the rest of their professional lives. Not as a wound, not as a punishment, but as a fact about themselves that they had produced and that Elliot had quietly, accurately, and permanently recorded. That was the exposure. Not a scene. A fact. I have been at Meridian for 8 months. The work is what I thought it would be from 2 years of listening to it explained by a person who understood it completely. The role is the right shape for the questions I want to ask. The office is the kind of place where people talk about the problem they are solving rather than about each other. Elliot and I have lunch on Tuesdays. Not every Tuesday. Most Tuesdays. We eat at our desks because it is efficient and because the Tuesday afternoon is the time of day that has the best quality of thinking available and we have both learned to protect it. He brings the same lunch in the gray insulated bag. He arranges it in the same order. I have stopped finding this notable and started finding it correct, the behavior of a person who has identified what works and does not perform variety for an audience that is not watching. Last Tuesday he looked over at 11:50 while I was finishing something and he said one thing. The latency question you asked in your first week. His voice. I've been thinking about it. I think you were right about the 2021 architecture decision. I looked up. What changed? My voice. He told me. 14 minutes. Precise and complete and entirely worth listening to. At the end I had a follow-up question. Ask it. His voice. I asked it. Here is what I know about the 2 years and 3 months. I was not kind to Elliot Marsh because I expected a return. I was not even meaningfully kind, by the standards of what kindness can be. I did the ordinary minimum of treating a person like a person, of answering when spoken to, of listening with actual attention when the answer arrived, of finding genuine interest in the thing another person was interested in because the thing was genuinely interesting rather than because the person needed me to find it so. That is a low bar. It is a low bar, and Elliot cleared the floor by it, and I was the only person who met it. I have thought about this many times in 8 months, and what I have arrived at is not a comfortable conclusion. The comfortable conclusion would be that I was uniquely good or perceptive or moral in a way that produced the outcome. The accurate conclusion is that I was ordinary in a way that the rest of the floor was not, and ordinary was sufficient, and the floor's failure to meet the ordinary bar was a choice they made every day for 2 years and 3 months without understanding what they were choosing. They were choosing not to ask the right questions. They were choosing the impression over the conversation. They were choosing the social cost of engaging genuinely with a person who did not fit the floor's unspoken requirements over the specific richness of what that person knew and thought and was building. They chose wrong. Not because of what it cost them later. Because of what it cost them every day while it was happening, every conversation they did not have, everything they did not learn, every Tuesday lunch they did not spend with someone who knew everything worth knowing about the problem they were all supposed to be solving. Elliot Marsh noticed every day. Not because he was keeping score. Because people who are treated as invisible develop the specific skill of detailed observation as the available alternative to belonging, and the detailed observation of a person who notices everything is the most accurate record in any room. He noticed every day. And the people who made him the subject of their impressions were being recorded in real time by the most attentive person on the floor, and what he recorded was not their worst moments but their ordinary ones, the daily accumulation of a choice they were making without realizing they were making it. The choice to not be curious. The choice to not listen. The choice to find the performance easier than the person. And the most important thing I ever did at that company was not heroic and was not strategic and did not require courage or vision or anything that deserves a particular name. It was asking a question on a Tuesday afternoon and wanting the answer. That was it. That was the whole thing. And if there is someone in your office right now who brings the same lunch in the same bag and answers questions with more detail than the questions seem to require and who you have not spoken to this week with actual attention, understand this: they are noticing. Every single day, they are noticing. And what they are building in the hours you spend not noticing them may be the thing that eventually shows every person in that room exactly what they chose to be when they thought nobody significant was watching.